Have you ever met a single person who is unfamiliar with Star Wars? Even on the off chance that they haven't seen the movies, everyone has at least heard about it. As such, is it all that surprising that this gargantuan franchise has spawned yet another TV show in the form of Star Wars Rebels? Now, I originally wasn't going to do a video like this since I had already given my thoughts in the episodic vlogs. But for consistency's sake, I've decided to review the first season as a whole. However, when I tackled this saga a while back, I was still doing those videos that went on for half an hour to an hour and just consisted of me trying to figure out what to say. Yeah, I'm not going to put you through that. Instead, let me quickly give you a little context about how this show came about. Star Wars has remained prominent in pop culture over the years, not only because the movies kept getting re-released, but also due to the slew of stories told through novels, comic books, and video games in what is commonly referred to as the expanded universe. Many of the ideas and concepts here were later incorporated into Star Wars: The Clone Wars, a CG animated series that ran on Cartoon Network from 2008 to 2013. After Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm, the show was cancelled in order to focus on Star Wars Episode 7. Also, the saga's official timeline was reorganized to retcon the expanded universe and only include the movies, the Clone Wars TV show, and basically anything from 2014 onward, which is where this show comes in. Taking place between the two trilogies, the series follows a street-smart orphan named Ezra, who has survived for years by stealing and looking out for Number One. One day, he sees a small group of rebels stealing from the Empire and giving back to the oppressed citizens. This band is made up of Chopper, a more irritable version of R2-D2, Zeb, the brutish muscle, Sabine, graffiti and explosives artist, Hera, expert pilot and stern voice of reason, and Kanan, the brash leader who is secretly one of the last of the Jedi. Although he initially wants nothing to do with this crew, Ezra is inspired by their selfless acts and eventually decides to join them. In addition, it turns out that this kid is strong with the Force, prompting Kanan to take him on as his apprentice. However, their crusade is challenged by the Inquisitor, one of Darth Vader's most dangerous agents in charge of eliminating the remaining Jedi in the galaxy. Now, a lot of people were ready to hate this show right out of the gate. Some saw it as the reason the Clone Wars was cancelled, even though it's made by the same creative team. Oh, it looks too kiddie and Disney-fied. Yeah, one of the only complaints that I was fully on board with was the fact that the origin of the Rebel Alliance had already been told fairly well in Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. But that doesn't count anymore! Haha! Surprisingly, these gripes aside, the show is very good, even great at times. A large part of that has to do with the characters. They're all likable and distinct, each having their own personality and characteristics. The fact that these are original characters that haven't shown up in any of the films gives the writers more wiggle room than in the Clone Wars. While it was an impressive feat that they were able to make Anakin Skywalker a fairly likable guy as opposed to a whiny little prima donna, they had a fundamental disadvantage in that they were stuck with boring characters like Padme and Samuel L. Jackson. Here, there are more opportunities for creativity in fleshing out these characters. With that, the writers decided to inject a welcome degree of self-awareness into the dialogue. They're not poking fun at the mythology, but they do acknowledge the humor and frustrating intangibility of something like the Force. Kanan was still in training when the Jedi were wiped out, so teaching Ezra is a learning experience for both of them. As such, they're more relatable than some mystical master and his unquestioning student.
Do or do not. There is no try.
What does that even mean? How can I do something if I don't try to do it?
Well, see... Actually, that one always confused me too, but Master Yoda sure used to say it a lot.
These are questions and reactions that we as audience members would have, so these characters feel more real to us. Another strength is the voice acting by Freddie Prinze Jr. as Kanan and Taylor Gray as Ezra, who have great brotherly chemistry with each other. Aside from them, the other crew members are also pretty appealing. Hera is basically the matriarch, a strong and capable pilot who keeps things up and running, makes sure everyone stays safe and level-headed, and calls them out whenever they do something stupid. Although she can be stern and sarcastic at times, She also has a motherly and reassuring attitude that makes her an extremely engaging female figure. Part of this can be attributed to Vanessa Marshall's performance. She's been in the voice acting field for years, and it shows in her natural charisma. Even Zeb, who one might see as the comic relief character, is given some depth. He's voiced by Steve Bloom, another voiceover veteran, and he fully embraces the brutish side to the character while offsetting it with an amusing wit. Sure, he's thuggish and animalistic, but he balances this out by sharing a laugh every once in a while, usually at the expense of other people. Sabine is probably the least defined, wanting to express her individuality in an age of conformity enforced by the Empire by joining the rebels and vandalism. As it stands, she's fun, mostly due to Tia Sarkar's enthusiastic performance, but we don't really get as much time to develop her personality and motivations as we do the other characters. Now, when I saw the Inquisitor, I thought, isn't that design a little over the top? Like Darth Nosferatu? Then again, subtlety has never really been in the repertoire when it comes to Star Wars villains, so I let it slide. I'm glad I did, because he's actually a fairly intimidating villain. When they said that he specialized in hunting down Jedi, they weren't kidding. He knows their techniques, how to draw them in, and how to manipulate their emotions. Also, they got Jason Isaacs as the voice. Well versed in playing villains, he's menacing, methodical, and unsettlingly intelligent, always maintaining his chilling composure. And of course, we have the guest stars and cameos. Honestly, I'm surprised that they were able to get some of these actors. Sure, we had Liam Neeson guest starring on The Clone Wars, and Anthony Daniels plays C-3PO for the millionth time, but this show brought back James Earl Jones as Darth Vader for the ABC broadcast of the premiere. Not only that, Frank Oz returns to voice Yoda, or at least the disembodied voice of Yoda. You know, sort of like when Obi-Wan spoke to Luke at the end of the original movie. However, the one who gets the biggest role is Billy D. Williams as the sweet-talking Lando. All three of these actors step comfortably back into their respective roles and are as enjoyable as ever. Additionally, we have a few smaller roles occupied by actors that I never even saw coming. David Oyelowo gives a sneering turn as Agent Callus. James Hong plays a gangster that's sort of like a cross between Jabba the Hutt and David Lo Pan. And Brent Spiner even pops up as a senator who speaks out against the Empire. But the two guest stars most essential to the main story come toward the end of the season. Eventually, the rebels become such a problem that Tarkin shows up, voiced again by Stephen Stanton doing a terrific Peter Cushing impression. I've always liked this character, and not just because of the actor playing him. He gets things done and he sees the bigger picture, knowing what these rebels represent and what kind of message their actions could send to the citizens. Watching him walk all over the other Imperial officers, who have been pretty incompetent up to this point, is immensely satisfying. Finally, the mysterious contact who had been giving intel to the heroes is revealed to be Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker's former apprentice, voiced wonderfully by Ashley Eckstein. Now that's what I call a twist. Speaking of that, the storytelling definitely gets better as the season goes on. Toward the beginning, the show was still finding its feet in terms of tone. The dialogue harkens back to the lively back-and-forth conversations from the original trilogy, but it could get a little excessive and too cartoonish after a while. The show might then cut to something like death or famine on the other end of the tonal spectrum. Fortunately, as the seasonal arc came more into focus, the show seemed to balance out and have a fairly consistent swashbuckling atmosphere. Again, like the original trilogy. The series is at its best during the very balanced episodes dealing with the growing rebellion and character backstories. Most of the development is given to Ezra, who gradually focuses less on self-preservation and more on proving himself and protecting his friends. Also sprinkled throughout the season are smaller-scale episodes that are just supposed to be fun. At best, we get the Lando episode, Idiot's Array. At worst, we get Fight or Flight, which involves Ezra and Zeb shopping for groceries and stealing a TIE fighter. You know, this just feels like a 7-minute short stretched into a full-length episode. It's occasionally chuckle-worthy, but it mostly feels like a waste of time. Now, let's talk about the animation and design. Even though the color scheme is jarringly bright at times, especially at the beginning, many of the characters are modeled after concept drawings that Ralph McQuarrie did for the original trilogy. For instance, Zeb was based on the original design for Chewbacca. I have to admit, it took me a while to get used to this art style, but I eventually warmed up to it. I will say this though, they have to fix the Wookiees. They look awful, almost like they're melting. Which is sad considering how they looked in the Clone Wars. Look at them, they look good, so what happened? Oh well, at least the animation is top-notch. Although the facial expressions are occasionally exaggerated, the CG animation as a whole is pretty impressive for a TV show. It's especially striking in the action scenes, specifically the lightsaber duels, which are fluid and creative. The overall presentation is strengthened by the dynamic musical score, which should be instantly familiar. Most of the themes are reminiscent of the iconic John Williams score. You might consider this uncreative and unoriginal, but this is Star Wars, and more John Williams is never a bad thing. Overall, the first season of Star Wars Rebels has won me over, to the point where I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes in Season 2. The characters are charismatic and appealing, the writing, for the most part, manages to be both funny and dramatic, the animation is beautifully smooth, the voice acting is accomplished on all fronts, and there's an overarching sense of charm that pays homage to old-school Star Wars while remaining fresh and exciting.